there. Here we are, 6 o'clock right on the dot. So good to have you with me tonight. Just as we're getting started and giving other people just a half a second to show up, just would love it if you would take a moment, find that chat box, not the Q&A box, but the chat box, and drop a comment in there. I would love to know what your experience with iridology is so far. Are you brand new? Have you had an iris analysis? Have you been studying it on your own? Have you taken courses? It will help me to modify this presentation on the fly so that it meets your needs better. I want this next hour and a quarter or so that we're going to spend together to be really worth your time. And I can do that better if I know a little bit about you. So go ahead, find that chat box and just let me make sure I've got that set up right. Oh, you know what? It's so much easier if I set it like this. There you go. Now you can probably find the chat box. I'm just going to give you a minute to give me some information about you, get a little bit about your background. You know, even if you've got your anatomy and physiology already under your belt, the more I know about you, and you can keep it as general as you would like. This is, after all, a public forum with people you don't know. But as general as you'd like or specific as you'd like. But the more I know about you, like I said, the more I can tailor make this to be what you need it to be. All right. So the what, why, and how of iridology for health professionals. We've got an attendee who's brand new. Welcome. Welcome. And another one who's new but very interested. Excellent. So good. Excellent. Keep those comments coming in. We are always a small group, and what you're going to find is the more you play with me in my chat box, the more information you'll get from me. So feel free to ask questions, make comments, and I'll be asking lots of questions and asking for your feedback on those things. And I want to put your mind at ease. I'm not selling anything in this class. You can, you know, if you were afraid you might be asked for a credit card and time limited and, you know, there's only 4 seats available kind of thing. I don't do that. That's not how I roll. So if you thought you were going to be pressured, don't. Just put it away. Nicole says, thanks for having me. I have 3 books on iridology and have my eye on a camera. Whoa, Nicole, good for you. Good for you. So with this, we are going to get ready to dive right in. Now, most of the time when you come to a class like this, you're expecting a lot of information, and I'm going to give you a lot of information. I've got a bit of a tickle in my throat. Pardon me while I make sure I don't start coughing. There we go. Disclaimer, Cobblestone Health Limited, doing business as Iridology Education, is not responsible for any results, good or bad, you get from using this information I'm going to share with you. You alone are responsible for the results you get. If you use iridology, you are responsible to have the appropriate liability insurance. You are required to respect and adhere to local laws regarding required credentials for the use of iridology and the offering of nutritional or supplement advice. I really don't like that we have to read things like that, but this is the world we live in. So why are you here tonight? I would love to know. Are you looking for a low invasive way to assess your clients? You've heard about it as being a diagnostic tool, perhaps? Maybe you've studied iridology already and it's not working for you and you wonder if you're missing something or doing it wrong. Or maybe you're just curious and you wanted a low commitment way to investigate iridology further. Now, if I've missed your reason, share it with me in the chat box. Maybe there's another reason you're here and I haven't thought of that yet. And so I would love to know if you've got another reason for being here, again, so I can make sure that we address it for you. And I need to make sure that I did the record button. I always have that little panic moment when I think, did I remember to hit record? And I did. Fantastic. So we've got someone saying number 3, just curious and want a low commitment way to investigate it further. That is perfect. This is the right place to do that. And fascinated with the study of eyes. Fantastic. Love that too. So maybe you've heard about iridology or you've experienced iridology as a diagnostic tool and you're looking for a low invasive way to assess your own clients. This is a really important one for so many people. You might be surprised to learn that Iridology can save you time. If you work with clients now, if you do nutrition coaching, maybe you're a nurse practitioner and you need another way to assess clients to use in addition to requisitioning lab tests. Maybe you're a herbalist and you need a great way of assessing people on a deeper level. When you do iridology the way I teach it, it will save you a lot of time. It will help you get to the root of things without your clients feeling like you're glossing over things. That, to the contrary, it will make them feel like you are hearing them, you are resonating with them, you are getting to where you need to go with them. An appropriate assessment with program creation for a client can be done in 20 minutes. Now, if your appointments typically like to run about an hour long, that leaves you 40 minutes to continue to build rapport and to build that depth of communication that we like to have in holistic healing. As a matter of fact, when you're in my course, I encourage you to start using what you've learned after the second lesson, right? I want you practicing it and seeing how it works in your business and experimenting with how to fit it in while we are in a teaching situation so that I can coach you and guide you and give you some solid practical advice here. Iridology is also wonderful for developing rapport and helping you gather other pertinent information. And the big bonus is when you do iridology and create programs the way I teach you how to create programs, it will encourage your clients to keep coming back for follow-ups. And they'll come back for 3 or 4 or 5 follow-ups. That's great. And then they'll be feeling good. So they're going to disappear for a few years. But when they start to fall apart again, they get older, something shifts, they're not feeling great, they're going to think about you and they're going to come back to see you. I cannot count on any number of fingers or toes how many times I've seen that happen in my own practice. Clients that I've had for over 4 decades now, we do that. They'll come in for 4 or 5 appointments, get them feeling great. And I know they're feeling great because I'm not hearing from them. And I know that things are shifting when they want to come back in and do some more work with me, right? And that's just how life is. So if you've heard, if your reason is you've heard about iridology, your reason for being here, and you're looking for more information about it to see if it would be useful in your wellness coaching work, welcome. Maybe you've studied iridology already and it's not working for you. Now, this is something I take very seriously. If you studied iridology and it's not working for you, it's not your fault. I've had many students who were previously certified by other instructors and they were taught solid iridology, but they were not taught how to use it in clinical work. They were taught the nuts and bolts. They could identify any marking I showed them and they could describe what it meant in very narrow terms, but they could not connect the markings and integrate that with symptoms to help them create succinct and beneficial programs for their clients. So they didn't learn practical application. And because of that, these students, these iridologists, feel like they failed because they've studied a skill and they don't know how to use it. That's a challenge. Most teachers don't actually teach practical application. Many of them say, oh, you'll figure it out. And I don't believe in doing that. I don't believe in taking my students and throwing them in the deep end and saying, oh, you'll figure out how to swim. I want to give them a starting point. And they may not do it the way I teach them, for the rest of their practice. They may start out that way, but at least they've got a starting point. They know one system that works, one way of applying iridology in a clinical setting that works well. And as they continue to work with clients, they will morph that into their own system. And that's exactly what I want to have happen. But it's so much easier to adapt a system than to create one from scratch, right? So my goal is to give my students that solid foundation, not just in nuts and bolts, but in practical application. So if you are already trained in iridology, but you're lacking confidence, or you want to add more knowledge and you want to be mentored as you do that, welcome. Maybe you're just curious. Now, this is totally fair. You know, when I went to university as a young adult, I applied to two different schools that I thought I wanted to attend, and they were both good schools. And I was accepted to both, which was pretty cool. I thought that was really great. The one that won out was the one that invited me down for a weekend to show me around. You need to do the same when you look for an iridology course. You should talk to the teacher. You should sample their teaching style. You should get a sneak peek at the learning materials. Basically, you should be touring the campus, right? And that might be exactly why you're here tonight. You want to learn a bit about iridology. You want to see what's out there as one option for learning iridology. So if that's you, I am glad you are here. Now, this again is an interactive webinar. I've got a lot to share with you, and I hope you brought pen and paper. Oh, that's very old school. To write down any questions you have. I will be asking for your questions throughout the time we spend together, and I'll do my best to fit answers in, weave them into what we're doing. And so I do feel free to ask questions. That is so important, so important. The facts of the matter are that iridology is a powerful assessment tool, and confidence can be nurtured and developed. Right, now that we figured out why you're here, I hope you'll give me just a moment now to introduce myself, to tell you why I'm here. I'm only one of 10 level 3 IPA certified instructors in the world. Level 3 is the top level. I was one of the first 3 to certify as a level 3 instructor in the summer of 2021. And they make us. We are required as instructors to update our credentials every 2 years. And so you see the last 4 years of my credential updates. But level 3 was only added in 2021. And again, I jumped at the chance to be one of the first to be certified at that level. I've been in the holistic health industry since 1981. I've been coaching people one-on-one. I've been teaching classes in nutrition and herbology. And, you know, when I started out way back then, I mean, that's pre-internet. We couldn't have done a class like this, a master class like this. Here in the city where I live, there was nothing available. I had taken courses, you know, gone to different places and done different kinds of courses and traveled to get what I needed. But there wasn't anything really being offered here in the city. So I started teaching courses. I started this journey at the age of 20 when I had health problems that the doctors couldn't sort out. I was still in university at the time, and I was studying to be a school teacher. I'd always wanted to be an elementary school teacher. But I ended up dropping out of university just 2 semesters before I graduated, and I got married. And I have to tell you, I love teaching. It is a passion for me, and I made such a good decision to not be a school teacher for young children. I'm a much better teacher for adults. I'm not very good with kids. So there you have it. I've studied iridology and herbology and nutrition and so many other things with so many teachers that I've lost count. Anyone else like that? How many of you are perpetual students? I want to see a show of hands. I want to see if I am among equally driven people. Okay. Nicole says, I've studied nutrition and herbalism and will soon have certification. My husband is a hearing instrument specialist. Love learning gal. Yes. Okay. Fantastic, Nicole. Yes. Brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. I think Marie, she's raised her hand. I think she's saying she likes to be a perpetual learner as well. My husband and I'm going to tell you some private stuff here. My husband and I, we like to read before we go to bed. And it's really funny to compare the books we're reading. Like he's into, you know, action adventure novel kind of things. And right now I am reading traditional Chinese medicine applications for infertility. That's my bedtime reading, right? So I just love reading. I love learning, and I love learning things that are useful for me to help other people. So my reading is very different from my husband's, which is kind of funny. Over the many years, I have written and self-published many books. They're all currently out of print, except for the Dynamic Iridology Assessment System course textbook, which is available to my students. I've designed and taught courses including Dynamic Iridology, And that is an IPA, that's International Iridology Practitioners Association approved course that includes their complete level 1 and level 2 courses that are required to become a certified iridologist with IPA. Why IPA? Because it's an arm's length third party certification organization and not for profit. I'm always a little bit suspect, and maybe this is just me. I'm suspicious of teachers who give certifications. In the health world, the nursing school you go to doesn't give you the nursing certification. You have to pass board exams to be certified by the board, right? And that's your credibility. And I believe the same is true with iridology, that it should be a third person, arm's length kind of organization. I've designed courses about herbs, biokinesiology, color therapy, women's health. For a while, I was an ICEA certified prenatal educator. I really had fun with that. I'm also a master herbalist and a holistic nutrition professional. These are the professional organizations I am a member of. Okay, that's enough about me. Since we're talking about the benefits of using iridology in clinical work, let's hear from one of my students first, and then we're going to dive into some information about iridology. This is Karen Choate. She is a CNHP, natural digestive health specialist, and the owner of Natural Digestive Health Center. She posted this first comment on Facebook a couple of years, actually probably 5 years ago now. She said, Judith, I just returned from a regenerative detoxification course where iridology is implemented. I spread the word about what a wonderful teacher you are. Most people I talked with did not have anywhere near the same experience with their iridology education. They had no support, unanswered questions, and a lot of confusion. Mostly they finished their classes not knowing how to implement what they had learned. I feel so totally, absolutely blessed to have been taught by you. I feel totally supported even still, as I've graduated almost 5 years ago now. I don't think there's anyone out there practicing, educating, and teaching iridology like you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart. I'm eternally grateful for your never-ending patience and support. I asked Karen in that same group, how has learning constitutional iridology helped her in her business? How has adding that skill helped? This is what she said. Iridology has helped me to understand the relationships between different organs and organ systems more in depth. Iridology also gives me an advantage of seeing the potential for different genetic traits and qualities that may be underlying. By observing the constitution, for example, you can extrapolate how the person's body will likely respond to applications of healing methods. Therefore, it has helped me expand my knowledge and increased efficiency at providing more precise recommendations for health-oriented options. It's exactly why I teach. Exactly. So stay with me till the end of our time together today, the end of our presentation, the end of this master class. I'm going to share with you some information about the Dynamic Iridology Assessment System course that will be starting again towards the end of this month. But in order for us to understand what iridology is, it's important for us to understand where it came from and how it developed. We're going to do this really fast because we really want to spend some time looking at eyes, right? Do you agree with me? You want to spend more time looking at eyes than talking about history, right? So what we know is that iridology is rooted in ancient history, or in ancient history, Egypt, India, China, Greece, right? We also know that science evolves. We once thought the earth was flat. We now know more. We've got more information, different information, and most of us believe the earth is round. There are still some people who believe it's flat, and they have failed to keep up with the research, or they've chosen not to keep up with the research, or maybe they've just chosen to dig their heels in and stay where they are. Those are all reasons people might still believe the world is flat. But it is true that science evolves. Science is the art of asking questions. And when we ask the right questions, we get answers that actually will trigger another layer of questions. So science never has a hard and fast absolute answer. Science is always asking what comes next, what comes next, what comes next. And so good scientists will continue to ask those questions, and good iridologists will ask those questions as well. The good scientists will test their own hypotheses. They'll test the hypotheses of other scientists and other researchers. What we often think of as final answers today are really just stepping stones to future discoveries, even and especially in iridology. In spite of what you might see in print, we do not know everything there is to know about iridology. The amount that iridology has changed since 1979, when I started learning iridology, man, is it different. Totally different. Ignaz van Petzele was a medical doctor. He actually became a medical doctor because he was fascinated with looking at eyes. James says, or we've looked at the details of the globe theory more closely than most. Yeah, possibly that's it too, right? Who knows? Who knows? And if you're a flat earther, go for it. I'm not judging you. And so Ignaz, as a child, had an experience that made him very interested in eyes. And when he became a medical doctor, he started studying his patients' eyes using a 2-power magnifying glass. And then he would draw what he saw, pictures, and then he would write out their story, what their symptoms were, what their history was. And he was one of the first people to start creating a map of the iris. He created one of the very first ones. It's very similar to what we use today after nearly 200 years of additional research. Pastor Neil Liljeqvist was in Sweden, and he came up with the theory that the more fibers we have per square inch, the more threads per square inch we have in an iris, the more resilient our health will be. That has proven to be true. It doesn't guarantee good health, but it means that when that person applies healthy principles that are appropriate, they will typically rebound faster. Their body will respond in positive ways much more quickly. Pastor Emanuel Falke in Germany, he started defining constitutions. We're going to take a look at constitutions today. And there is still an institute in Germany called the Falke Institute that teaches iridology the way Emanuel Falke researched it. And so we're going to, like I said, work with some of those constitutions that he started working with. In Germany, you have to be basically a naturopath or a medical doctor to be able to use iridology. Rudolf Schnabel, also in Germany, researched pigment and pupil tonus. So when we look at pigments, this is where one of the theories got launched that has been proven to be incorrect. And that is that when we see different color flecks in the eyes, he thought it was the result of toxic exposures. We now know that is not true. Pupil tonus, we've got some great information on that. So he laid a wonderful foundation for us there. Rudolf Schnabel said it was no easy task, and those who believe or would like to believe that handling iridoscopy or iridology can be learned within a few weeks or even days are mistaken and do a disservice to a good cause. I agree that to learn iridology well should not be done in a rush. It needs to be done over time and learned step by step so that you can not only get comfortable, but so that you can see what questions come up for you as you are learning the individual steps. Joseph Ungerer in Germany again wanted research to be reviewed by peers before it got published because so many people were publishing theories and people were reading these books and accepting it as proven and hard and fast and true, and we can rely on this, not realizing that they were reading theories. And that's where a lot of the conflicting information still comes from, is those theories that have since been disproven. Ungerer became a naturopath. He was actually a student of Schnabel's as well. He was concerned that everybody who was doing research seemed to be creating their own language around iridology. And he wanted everyone to find a meeting place. He wanted them to use this one language to create a unified language. And so we haven't had that happen yet. We're still trying to get rid of the things that have been disproved. He also refused to have his work published until it had been reviewed by his peers. He wanted his peers to test it out and make sure what he was teaching was sound. Along the way, there are other researchers postulated theories again, and we know that some of them have been proven untrue. And we've got Joseph Deck, who was in Germany as well. He published books about constitutional iridology, and we'll talk about him a little bit more in another, on another slide. Theodor Kriege, also in Germany, said iridology is not a standalone assessment tool. It is an assessment tool. It is not a diagnostic tool. The eyes do not give us disease names. They do. The eyes correlate with other things we know. I like to have my clients bring in labs. I like to have a good look at my client to see what other things their body is telling me. I like to have a conversation with my clients to get that deeper understanding of what's going on. And iridology will help give me a deeper understanding of everything that my client is sharing with me. And that's what we want to be doing here. In North America, we've got Bernard Jensen, right? So Bernard Jensen, lovely man. I never had the privilege of meeting him, but I know many people who did. And he single-handedly kept iridology alive in North America during the Cold War. He had attached himself to it and was using it in his practice in California on his Hidden Valley Health Ranch in Escondido, and did great things. But because the research from Germany was halted, couldn't come into North America, Bernard was not able to keep up with the changes as they came through. He did so much good for so many people, though, that, we just love him. We just love him and are grateful to him for having that tenacity to hold on to this and keep it going. Then we have Harry Wolff and Bill Cardona. Harry is an American-born German. He got his hands on a book written in German by Joseph Deck, and he started teaching it. I believe he was a massage therapist, and he had a couple of other holistic therapies. And so he started teaching this. He connected with Bill Cardona, who at the time was a registered pharmacist, and they started teaching it all over the place. Bill eventually taught iridology at Bastyr Naturopathic University, and then Bill became a naturopath himself. Bill is my constitutional teacher. I actually just exchanged emails with him this week. Bless him for being patient with me. After all of these decades, I still have questions. And I know I can run them past Bill. And I really appreciate that. Nicole says, I have a book by Bernard Jensen and Donald Bodine and another by Adam Jackson. Who would you recommend for best authors on the topic today? There is so much information out there right now. I attend so many workshops and master classes by different teachers that I don't know who's got books out there. A lot of people are just choosing to teach live rather than publish books these days. So I can't give you another author name. Sorry about that, Nicole. We're going to take a quick look at Jensenian. The three main styles that are practiced in North America are Jensenian, Rayid, which is emotional or behavioral, and constitutional. Today, we're only really looking at Jensenian and constitutional. We don't have time to do everything. So Jensenian was originally taught by Bernard Jensen. Now, you've already heard me express love and adoration for the man. He was teaching based on old concepts, the idea that the iris changes when the body changes, that healing lines will come into the eyes, that the lacuna shape and size will change. Only he called them lesions. Traditional Jensenian iridologists have often done iris readings cold with no background information from the client. And traditional iridologists have a very different style from modern Jensenian iridologists. So in Bernard's later years, his daughter-in-law, who had been working with him for quite a while, took over the business, and she'd been trained by Bernard, but she also recognized that things had moved forward. So she has incorporated a lot of constitutional concepts. When you hear her teach, you can still hear the Jensen undercurrents in things. And so you need to kind of be very aware of what is Jensen, what is constitutional, where do they overlap accurately and well, and where do they not, right? So it can be a little challenging at times. Constitutional iridology originated with Joseph Deck and others. It's used by medical doctors in Italy, Germany, and Russia. I had a client in a few months ago from a country, very near Russia. And she's actually a medical doctor herself, but she cannot practice in Canada. She has not done the board exams here. And she came in, and what she really wanted was for me to do iridology with her. She said in her country, Kazakhstan or one of those smaller countries, she said, that's the first thing the doctor does is he looks at your eyes. And the eyes guide what he's going to ask you and what he's going to do, or she is going to do with you. Found that very interesting. Correlative medical studies are being done. There are ongoing research projects that are underway now and have been going on for the last 7 or 8 years. There's probably more than that. I'm aware of one big one that's happening in California, which is very cool. Constitutional teaches that the eyes are a reflection of genetic structure of the body. So this is why the idea that we can change the eyes, that we can move fiber structure around, that we can take pigment out of the eyes, that we can change pigment by doing cleansing and diet doesn't work, because the eyes show us genetics, they show us epigenetics. And so when we see something, we won't see fiber move because that is like your fingerprint, but we can see pigment shift in different ways. That's always the result of epigenetic cues. And constitutional is the foundation of the dynamic iridology assessment system program. So iridology teaches us, it does not give us answers, but it teaches us what questions to ask. I loved learning that from Bill Cardona. I had been a Jensenian iridologist for about a decade when I heard about constitutional, and the Jensenian style was not working very well for me. So when I was able to start learning constitutional, and Bill kept saying, the eyes don't give us answers, they teach us what questions to ask. It made so much sense to me. Other iris and sclera changes may continue to become visible with time, revealing areas that may need support. Background information is important. Readings are not done cold. So when we are looking at the iris, or when we're doing iridology, we're looking at the iris, which is right in here. We're also looking at the inner edge of the iris. We're looking at the outer edge of the iris. We're going to also be looking at the size and shape of the pupil. We will look at the cornea. And we will look at the sclera. Each of those areas gives us different information. Right? Sclera gives us one type of information. The iris gives us another type. The edges of the iris give us more information. Pupil size and shape and cornea, they all give us information. And that information then guides our questions, helps us to understand why our client has the symptoms they have. All right, you ready to look at some eyeballs? Maybe learn a little iridology here? If you are, give me an oh yeah in the comments box. Let me know you're ready. We've got some hands up. That will do. Thank you. Hands are good too. Hands are good too. Okay. Marie Smith says, oh yes, love that, Marie. Thank you for that. Okay. First thing we're going to learn about is, first thing you need to know is with constitutional iridology, mapping is one of the very last things we do, if we even need to do it. Sometimes we don't even need to get there. Constitutional iridology relies very little on mapping. Because with mapping, and you've probably seen iris maps out there, the eye is subdivided into little teeny tiny sections. As a Jensenian iridologist, I was taught to look at each little section and is there anything in that section that is different from that I would expect to see in the rest of the eye? Is there a single fiber that's going off sideways? Is there a tiny spot of pigment? Is there a dark patch? Is there a loop or lacuna? Is there anything in the eye? And it would take hours to comb through an iris to come up with things. And that we didn't even do inner pupillary border or outer limbus or cornea or sclera. We were just looking at the iris, right? And so with constitutional, we actually take a step back. We want to look at the constitution of this person. What is this person's constitution? What are their inherent strengths? What are their inherent weaknesses? How does that tie into their symptoms or the things they want help with? We only dissect the person, use a map, and start pulling out individual markings as standalones if there's a good reason to. This really saves a lot of time. It increases the efficiency, it increases our efficacy, and it also helps us to create really good rapport. So this is a quintessential example of a lymphatic iris. With a lymphatic iris, there will always be at least a little bit of blue in the iris itself. It might not be predominantly blue, but there will be some blue poking through. There will always be some fiber. These are what we erroneously call fibers. Now we might have other colors overlaid. You can see we've got some other bits of color. Sometimes we've got white. We have other things sitting on top of the iris, basically. So with a lymphatic person, the questions that run through my mind first are, is there a personal or family history of anything that would suggest that you run higher acid through your body, not in your stomach, but throughout your body? So most people haven't got a clue what that means. So I break it down instead, and I'll ask, is there a personal or family history of anything like asthma, allergies, arthritis, eczema, psoriasis, or kidney issues? Those are all high acid situations. So I'm not even looking at any tiny details like pigments or fibers or crypts or lipemic diaphysis. That will all come later in the assessment. But even then, I'll only focus on markings that relate to my client's current health issues. Just share an example here. Many years ago, I was into triathlon and I got my kids into it too. And so one of our boys has asthma and we can control it beautifully with diet and with herbs. He is now a married man. He doesn't need his mama quite so much anymore. But he was younger. He was like about 8 or 10 years old. And his asthma was very much triggered by exercise. So when he was doing a triathlon, he would do the swim, he would do the bike. I would meet him at the start of the run and I would run with him and I would carry his asthma herbs in my hand or in my pocket so that if he started to get tight, I could give him these. So we went to the doctor, and this was a new doctor. The doctor we adored retired. So we went to this new doctor and I said, I wonder if there's any benefit in us having a puffer just for race days. And the doctor totally ignored me. Instead, he focused on my younger daughter and he said, can you see she has a problem with her eyes? No, she doesn't. Yes, she does. She's cross-eyed. No, she's not. We'd already gone through this with my son in that he had a problem with tracking. We knew what eyes that don't track like. And so this doctor kept pushing and pushing and pushing that we had to get the daughter checked out by our eye doctor, who happened to be a vision specialist, not just an eye doctor. So I finally took her in, and the eye doctor said, there's nothing wrong with her eyes. She worked 45 minutes to try to make my daughter go cross-eyed or make her go wall-eyed, make her eyes do anything that was abnormal, and it didn't work. Needless to say, we never went back to that original medical doctor because he didn't listen. So why do I tell you that story? When a client comes in, they sometimes think they want a list of everything you see in their irides. I won't do that because it's not relevant information. I want to know, why did you come in? What are your health concerns? What would you like my help with? When I understand that, now I can look at these eyes in the context of, what do these eyes teach me about my client? Not a whole bunch of random things that may or may not be relevant. They might eventually be relevant, but if this client has already figured out a good diet, most of what we see in a good lifestyle, most of what we see in the eyes may never come to fruition. This is a blueprint of what the body would like to do, not what it is doing right now. The symptoms are what it is doing right now. So I focus on what the client has asked for help with. Does that make sense? Does that make sense? Our clients want to be heard. They don't want to be treated like they often get treated in a doctor's office, where they get ignored and the doctor just sort of runs free will and doing whatever he wants. So I'll focus on the client's markings that relate to my client's current health issues. Now, that doesn't mean if they have a lung issue that I'm only looking at the lung area of the iris, right? I would look at the lung zones. I'll look at the bronchioles. I'll look at acid tendencies. Because we understand anatomy and physiology, I need to look at kidneys, lymphatics, skin, stomach, and the intestinal tract, since they all have an impact on the lungs. Nicole says, I like the perspective of not mapping. It seems very overwhelming at times. Oh my goodness, Nicole, you are so right. But because you understand anatomy and physiology, you understand all of the things that can have an impact on the lungs. And so you can take a quick look at those areas, ask pertinent questions about those areas, explaining to your client why you're asking those questions, and they begin to feel like you are really hearing them, that you're really working to understand them. I also like to look at the specific areas of the sclera and the pupil shape. These add more depth to the assessment, and they're not necessarily indicators that are only for lymphatic iris, right? So we always want to be taking into account what markings does this person have, what tendencies does this person have in their iris that correspond to their symptoms. This is another lymphatic iris. We've got some steel blue gray back here. It's not the beautiful, that's not the way I wanted to say that. Let me take that back. It's not the bright blue that we just looked at. It's a darker, slightly duller shade of blue. And that's okay. That is still a lymphatic iris. When we have an eye like this, we have other colors sitting on top of things. And these other colors teach us about different organs that inherently want to be out of balance. Where these colors are sitting teach us which organs are going to struggle because of that organ being out of balance. So what does that mean? It means that, for example, in this case, this is the stomach zone. It means the stomach needs support, and we might need to do something direct for the stomach. Maybe the stomach needs some aloe vera juice, or maybe it needs a good digestive enzyme of some kind. Maybe it would be happy with some ginger root. We need to sort that out. But more importantly, we need to look and see what color this is. On my computer screen, and every computer screen shows color differently. So if yours is different than mine, I'm not colorblind, I promise you. This is kind of a rusty brown color, yellowy orangey brown color, which says liver wants to impact digestion. So supporting the stomach might be of benefit, probably more beneficial to work with foods and supplements that are supportive of the liver, looking at the root cause. Does that make sense? If that makes sense, give me a makes sense in the comments box. Do you think you know someone who has lymphatic irides? Do you know someone who has either those bright blue eyes or the darker steel gray blue? Maybe they've got lavender colored eyes. Right. Okay, good. So maybe you're finding some information here that is resonating with you. People who have a lymphatic constitution are a little more predisposed to thyroid issues, even when there are no indicators in the thyroid area of the iris. Okay. And that's because the thyroid and parathyroid have a lot of interaction with calcium, right? And so if we've got too much acid, the body sends calcium to neutralize the acid. That means the thyroid and parathyroid cannot balance the calcium as well for going into the bones and into reserves and pulling them out when they need them. So we want to be aware that our lymphatic people can have that predisposition towards a thyroid imbalance because the calcium is likely out of balance. So we want to ask these persons questions about their family history. Is there a personal or family history of anything with thyroid or parathyroid and bone health? Right? So our goal here isn't to use iridology like it's some kind of crystal ball. This is not a party game of guess what's wrong with me. I've had clients come in and say, I just want you to tell me what's wrong. No, thank you. Not going to play that game. That's my crystal ball's broken. Not that I actually have one. I wouldn't know what to do with it anyways. And they're having problems getting parts for it at the repair shop, right? So we don't play that game. You give me a starting point. You give me a context. What would you like my help with? Is there a current symptom? Is there a symptom you want to avoid having? Maybe your parents both have type 2 diabetes and you don't want to have it. And you want me to work with you using Iridology to help guide you in creating a dietary program that will help you avoid those influences of potentially genetics that your parents have given you, right? Constitutional Iridology is about understanding the constitution, makes sense, right, of the person. So we can understand where they might be a little less resilient, where they might be more resilient, so we can understand why their health is the way it is and guide them to overall better health. Along the way, symptoms will subside. If they are following instructions, if they are doing their homework, you're recommending they do dietary things, you're recommending maybe they get more sleep, you're recommending some physical exercise, maybe you're suggesting some herbs or some supplements for them. They follow the instructions, they start to get results, right? We're not going to see the eyes change. We're not going to see this disappear. We're not going to see this all wash out and the whole eye become blue, right? We're not going to see that. This is all genetic or epigenetic, right? And quite frankly, I don't care if their eyes change anyways. I'm more concerned about how do you feel? Do you feel better? Do you have more energy? Are you sleeping better? Are your hormones better balanced? Is your digestion functioning better? Is your elimination functioning better? Is that rash you had gone? Have you learned what you need to know in order to keep this healthier balance? That's why I do Iridology. So is this making sense? If it is, give me a thumbs up or just say it makes sense. Just let me know that this is making sense. The purpose is not to change the eye color. The purpose is to improve the health. Fantastic, fantastic. So that is the tip of the iceberg for the lymphatic. We're going to cover, look at a couple of the other two primary constitutions. Now, again, this makes sense, more sense if you've already got college level anatomy and physiology under your belt. And actually that is a prerequisite for enrolling in the dynamic iridology course because it is a prerequisite for certification with IPA. My experience has been that when people do not have that college level anatomy and physiology, they get overwhelmed and they drop out about a third of the way through the program. My goal is not to take your money and hope you drop out. My goal is to see you through to the end of the course. And then if you want to certify, to walk you through that process as well. And so I've had many people where I've said, if they didn't have anatomy and physiology already, where I've sent them off to get that. I have a course that I send people to. I don't even get paid commission or referral fees for this, but it's a course that's a good course. And when they've got that, they come back to me to come through the iridology program. All right, just so important. Nicole said, well, that's a misconception I had about the eyes changing with the body healing. Yeah, that's, again, Jensen taught that. I was taught that. I believed that for the first 10 years of my iridology career. And never once in those 10 years did I see eyes change. Not the way Jensen and my teachers back then taught they would change. It wasn't until I got to Bill Caradonna that I really got that the eyes don't change like that. That's not why we do this. The brown eye, the true brown eye, this is called hematogenic. Now, the hematogenic eye might have some gold in it, but remember with our blue eyes, we had blue and we had visible fibers. With our brown eyes, there will be no blue and there will be no visible fibers. There will be so much pigment in the eye sitting on top of that fiber layer that it will hide the fibers. That's what a brown eye is. They've got pigment that the blue eye doesn't have. So we're not going to see blue or green in a brown eye. The key areas of concern for our hematogenic are blood and liver. And so again, this is inherent. This is inherent. So everything that we're working with our hematogenics, we're looking at it from the lens, through the lens of how does blood and liver affect this, or how are blood and liver impacted by this. Now, they can have other problems outside of that as well. It's just that those are the most common areas for these people to have issues. Here we have a hematogenic where we've got a lot of structure in the eye, a lot of structure. Now, what I want you to recognize is that here we can see fiber in here, and we can see fiber in here, right? And so what we're actually looking at is we do not see any of the top layer of fiber. There are many layers of fiber in an iris. And these structures are the separations in the top layer of the fiber, which means we are looking down a layer. We're looking at that second layer down and seeing the fiber that is the second layer down. The pigment that is hiding all the fiber on this top layer often doesn't get sprinkled down heavily enough to hide the fiber in lower layers. So this is still a hematogenic eye because that top layer is completely, the fiber is completely obscured. Does that make sense? If it does, give me the word fiber in the comments box. Let me know that that makes sense. Give me the word fiber there. I just want to make sure we're good. Yeah, we're good. Okay, we're hearing from some of you. Some of you are very quiet tonight. People with hematogenic eyes, when we look at liver and blood, we can expand that out to being, we might want to be watching for problems with spleen, stomach digestion, circulation, heart, varicose veins, pH. They tend to be more alkaline. Remember, lymphatics tended to be more acidic. Hematogenics tend to be more alkaline. And so that can mess with their mineral balance. And because they're more alkaline, they don't assimilate their calcium quite as well. If you're too alkaline, you spend your calcium where you shouldn't to try to keep your acid balance right. If you're too alkaline, you don't assimilate your calcium. So we can end up with some endocrine and metabolic imbalances because the minerals are not being assimilated well. So depending on what symptoms or imbalances your client wants help with, the questions you might ask based on iridology with your hematogenic person could include things like, is there a personal or family history of blood imbalances, allergies due to liver imbalances, hormonal issues, again, due to liver imbalances, blood lipid imbalances, including cholesterol, again, due to the liver, weight issues, oh golly, that liver again, right? Now, you wouldn't ask all those questions. You would choose the questions that relate to your client's concerns, right? We don't want to make this like an interrogation. We're not going to turn on the bright lights, shine it right in their face, and ask them a million questions. We're going to listen to what the client says, and then we are going to choose relevant questions. So if you know someone whom you're pretty sure has hematogenic eyes, give me a brown is beautiful in the chat box. Do you know someone who's got hematogenic eyes where you think, oh yeah, their eyes are really brown? Give me brown is beautiful in the chat box. Each of these other markings actually give us information. These are, again, structural markings that, depending on how they're sitting, may necessitate, and depending on symptoms, may necessitate mapping, or it may be that we look at them all together as a whole, as a constitution, and we might do some of both. And we've got some of you who have brown-eyed people in your life. Wonderful. So these are some of the other details that we would talk about. Now, we would also talk about in the course things like, what are the nutritional requirements? The unique nutritional requirements for hematogenic. What are some herbs you might use? What are some supplements you might use? What are their physical activity requirements? What are their emotional requirements? Right. So we cover a lot in the course that is more about the therapy and again, the application of iridology and its usefulness as an assessment tool and to help you with program creation. Our last constitution is the biliary eye type. Now, when you see biliary, what does that make you think of? What does that make you think of? Biliary, bile. Yeah, Nicole, good work. Good work. Good work, Marie. You're saying bile as well. So what organ produces bile? Not what organ stores it, but what organ produces it? The liver. Yeah. Way to go, Marie. Lightning fingers there. Good job. So, and Nicole is saying liver as well. Nicely done. So when we see a biliary eye, this is the eye of someone who had a lymphatic parent or grandparent and a hematogenic parent or grandparent somewhere in their bloodline. So they've got traits of both the lymphatic and the hematogenic. When we see this eye, we know that's what we've got because we're not seeing any blue, but we do see fiber. So you remember lymphatic was blue and fiber. Biliary is no blue, yes fiber. Hematogenic is no blue, no fiber. Okay, so that's our continuum. Now, because this person has the lymphatic side and the hematogenic side, we need to take all of that into account. When I first learned iridology, I was taught that this type of an eye was toxic, that this person needed to be cleansed. There was only two eye colors, blue and brown, nothing in between. So this person needed to cleanse. Okay, so green is interesting. Nicole, I want you to go back to kindergarten. What colors did you mix to get green? How did you get green? Blue and yellow. Absolutely, blue and yellow. So when you have a green eye, you've got a lymphatic eye with a yellow pigment over the top, and that yellow pigment teaches us a whole set of information as well. And that's beyond the scope of how deep we're going to go tonight. But that is something we do cover in the dynamic iridology course. So with this one, again, you know, those first 10 years, oh, my clients, how they survived me, I will never know. Because these are the people that I would cleanse, and they felt better. They got results as far as their symptoms went, as far as how they were feeling, but their eyes did not change. Right. And so we know in constitutional iridology that we're not going to flush this out. This is all genetically set. This is, and this is the eye type that trips up the most iridologists, right? For identifying, is this biliary, or usually they want to call it hematogenic. This is biliary. No blue. We see some fibers. We don't need to see fibers all over, but we see some areas of fiber. We might have gold or lighter colors in these wrinkles. We call these contraction furrows. We often will have slightly darker area close to the center of the eye surrounding the pupil. So with this then, I just double check that, just hang on just a second. Right, okay. So with this then, the questions we're going to ask, and again, you can see we've got that uneven brown and gold tone in this eye, and we've got some fiber that is visible in lots of little places, but there's no blue. So that means this is biliary. So our questions here are going to circle around things like digestion, personal and family history of. So is there a personal or family history of stomach issues, of intestinal issues, of liver issues? Now, so often when we think about liver, we think about liver as an organ that cleans garbage out of the blood, right? But the liver does 500 different jobs. This is another reason why having anatomy and physiology under your belt is a good thing. Not that I expect you to know all 500, but if you know that the liver has functions with the immune system, with the lipid balance, with blood sugar balance, with triglyceride balance, with allergies, with tissue repair, with protein metabolism, with carbohydrate metabolism. I mean, liver does a lot with storage of certain vitamins and minerals, right? That also will add to the depth and direction of questions you can ask, right? Gallbladder is often an issue here. Again, when we say liver, we often go liver, gallbladder, right? They often come together. And so oftentimes our biliary people will be a little more prone to gallstone formation. We think of pancreas and blood sugar. Liver and pancreas have to talk together. They have to work together in order to keep the blood sugars balanced. And so when we see a biliary eye, we're going to be listening for indications that the blood sugars want to be imbalanced, that the client is struggling with that, so that we can work this through. How are you doing? You doing okay with this? Nicole says, I've seen the sodium ring appear on someone very close. Yes, it will build with time. What you would call a sodium ring, we would call a lipemic diathesis. Okay, because it's not just about sodium. That ring has actually very little to do with sodium, as the research has shown. And fabulous and loving it. Fantastic. Okay, so what has been your biggest takeaway so far? What is the thing that as we've gone through this, you've gone, wow, I did not know that, or that changes my whole perspective? What is your biggest takeaway? I want to know that this was valuable for you so far. Like the idea of communication with the client. Oh, so important. So important. It's a critical piece. My mom is 91 and she's alone now. My dad passed 4 years ago. So I was out spending the day with her today, and a certain degree of frustration. She's finally found a doctor, and she thought she had communicated to the doctor what her concern was. And yet when she went for the appointment, the doctor completely went in a different direction. And so it's like, dang, she lives like 45 minutes away. So it's not easy for me to get out there to go to her appointments with her. But it's the communication between her and her doctor is clearly not well established yet. He's new to her. And I've got to find a way to nurture that communication. So while I was out there visiting her, I wrote a list of questions that I wanted the doctor to give answers for, right? So that we could understand why the doctor is going in that direction. Probably makes sense to him, but it doesn't make sense to me. And if I'm the primary caregiver, I need to know what direction they're going so I can be supportive, or so I can say, hey, wait a minute, I think we need to have another conversation here. Nicole says the biggest takeaway for her is the different concepts, and I appreciate you pointing out the different languages that has been used in the study. Knowing that illuminates so much for me. Yes, yes. All right, let's take another leap forward. Some other things that we need to be aware of when we are doing iridology is that there are layers to the iris, right? And we've talked about this a little bit on the hematogenic eye. When we see markings like this is separation in the top layer of fiber. And you can see very clearly that there is at least one more layer of fiber beneath that. There's probably more than just 2 layers. The more separation we have, the more layers that are separated, the more shading we are going to have in areas. Now, it might be in a shape like this where we get a lot of shading because there's a lot of separation down through the layers. Or it might be, and I don't have a good example of it on the screen, but let's do it. Let's pretend. We've got this little area here that's a little bit darker, again, possibly because of some separation in the fibers. But if we had more separation in more layers of fibers, this would be a dark stripe. All right, so that's another layer of information for us. Some of the fibers look quite raised on these eyes, like they're sitting on top. That gives us more information. These kinds of wrinkles in the eyeball give us a lot of information about how this person manages stress and how they manage their stress nutrients. And then we have what shows up in the cornea. This is what I believe it was Nicole said is a sodium ring. We would call this a lipemic diathesis or a corneal annulus. This is in the cornea, not in the iris, but it gives us information. It builds over time. And when we see this, this is not just about blocking arteries. This gives us information on about 3 or 4 different levels that then beg different questions for us to understand why has this formed over time. Again, there's always a genetic influence. I started learning iridology in 1979, and constitutional iridology was not yet widely available. It certainly had not reached Canada yet. It was starting to spread in the US. That's about the time of Harry Wolff and Bill Cardona. So I did study Bernard Jensen. I embraced everything I was taught. I worked hard at understanding it and at using it. But again, I would see an eye like this, and I had been taught that if we did the right diet, this would go away, or that all of these fibers in here were actually healing lines, and eventually this would go away and there would be no more shape on the top and everything would be wonderful. In the years that I worked with Jensen's iridology, I never saw anything like that happen. I didn't see clouds like this disappear, or even a tiny minute pigment like this. It never went away. Right? In spite of all of the cleansing and the herbs and the special diets and everything, I never saw the changes I was promised would happen. In constitutional iridology, again, we know that these are inherited. These are passed down through the generations. And if nutrition is faulty, then that's going to affect the quality of the genetic material that's passed on. The better the nutrition is, we can maybe have a positive impact on the DNA, RNA kinds of stuff that are passed on, right? So when we are seeing something like this, again, it's not, are the eyes going to change? It's, are the client's symptoms coming under control? If this person is on track, if she's doing what needs to be done for her health, then we can teach her what the next step is. So maybe she comes in and she's got some minor symptoms, and we see these eyes. As a Jensenian, it was like, oh my goodness, problem, 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 problem. As a constitutional iridologist, I can say, this is the problem you brought in. These are the specific markings. I'm just pointing to random things that give me information about your problem. This is what you're already doing that is positive to help get control of the situation. Here are some additional steps to help you move your health forward. So we're always considering the context, not just of the symptoms and the eye, but what is the client already doing, right? Because many of your clients will already be doing good things, and we want to build on that, right? Okay. Fantastic. Okay, just catching up on comments here. So good. Case study here. We're going to look at her eyes with 2 different kinds of lighting, because lighting makes a lot of difference here. This is a real challenge when you see before and after photos on social media. You want to verify that the lighting was the same in the befores and in the afters, because if it wasn't, you've nullified the value of before and after, right? In a scientific study, you change one parameter, and if they're saying this person did a cleanse and their eyes changed, but they've also changed the lighting in the photos, that's 2 things that have changed. Now you've negated the study. Do you agree with me? Do you understand what I'm saying? Okay, so if we're going to do this as a science, we need to treat it as a science. So this woman came to me wanting to have a baby. She and her husband had been trying for a year with no luck. Her husband's semen analysis was fine. This client was having a menstrual cycle every 28 days. The thing that caught my attention was when I asked her about her menstrual flow, she said it is a smear on the toilet paper. She never ever had to use any sanitary products. She did not have a flow. She had a smear. Now, the medical world thought this was just fine. I don't think it's fine. That to me says that regardless of what your day 3 and day 21 hormone tests are, something is not right. Now, she also had almost no ovulatory mucus, which also says something is not right. Okay. So as I'm looking at her eyes, I notice this right here. Can you see this little tiny, very faint orangey brown pigment? In iridology, the rule is less is more. So if we only have one orangey brown pigment, and she's actually got two, she's got two orangey brown pigments throughout her whole eye, maybe a tiny third one here. They're very small. Less is more. Those are important markings. It's not so much that all of these are important. These give us more about some of her constitutional setups and maybe a little bit about organs, but these little pigments give us a ton of information. They suggest to me, and this is some of the research that's coming out of California right now, that she is a prime candidate for having the MTHFR defect. And that means she will likely have reduced fertility. That is one of the symptoms of the MTHFR defect. It also means she has to have her B vitamins in the methylated form. Now, when we do add all of these lacunae out here, that tells us that she is predisposed to hormonal endocrine imbalances. Okay, so this is all starting to add up. Now let's look at her next slide. You can see a little bit of the wrinkles in her eyeball here, and a little bit up here, and a little bit here. Look at when we go to side lighting. We have so many more of these, so many more. Can you see that difference? If you can, give me difference in the chat box, in the comments. Okay, so with her, we know that this means that she functions as a sympathetic dominant personality. Her diet was clean, but it was very low in fat and very low in protein. Right, and so with that, we knew that our first work had to be getting her to eat protein and getting her to include more fat in her diet. She was in a high stress job, so we had to really work with supporting her nervous system and her adrenal glands and her liver. Her liver is going to be really important here as we pump in more protein and more fat. Liver's got to be able to process that to help us make the hormones and get the hormones balanced so much better. We also created a very unique herbal program for her where she took a specific set of herbs and supplements for the follicular phase of her cycle and a specific set for the luteal phase of her cycle. So there was always a shift in the middle as we were working on things. And sometimes I would check her temperature charts and, you know, she'd be on one program and I'd go, no, we need to switch this up right now. You've got this and this on hand. Let's pump this up right now to get you ready for ovulation. So we really worked very specifically with her, combining eye information, basal body information, vaginal mucus information. It took her a few months to, and she called me. She said, basically, I don't know whether to hug you or slug you. And it's like, okay, that means we've had something good, but you don't like it. And so she said, yeah, I got my period today and I actually needed to use sanitary products. I'm going, yes, that's what we wanted. We need that endometrium to be built up, right? So a few months later, she had a positive pregnancy test. Now, she was a very nervous Nellie. She did the 23andMe at about 4 months into her pregnancy, and she sent me an email that I thought was going to make my computer explode. She was so anxious because it had come back positive for the MTHFR defect. I had called it. I didn't diagnose her. I put a question mark in her file. MTHFR, did not say that to her. That was just in her file. I had that suspicion. And because I had that suspicion, I was giving her the supplements to support her in case she was MTHFR. Right. And so I was able to say to her, and she actually phoned me and I said, can you see a computer screen? And she said, yeah. I said, let's hop on Zoom. I want to show you something. So I pulled up her iPhotos and I said, you see that? That made me think you might be MTHFR. And the fact that you've come back positive just squares it away. But those special supplements I've been giving you are because I had that suspicion. I've had your back since the get-go. Put that worry away. We've taken care of it. You're good, right? So she was pretty happy that she didn't have to worry about it. That again is another reason why you want to have your anatomy and physiology under your belt, right? We don't need to nitpick every detail. We should not nitpick every detail. We should know how to connect the markings and understand what they mean about this person's body and how the person's body works as we hear the symptoms. Anyone can make a list of markers and a list of recommendations. You'll see lots of that on social media. Very few iridologists are trained well enough to be able to think through an iris, connect the dots, and then create a succinct program that gets to the core of the issue. Let's do another client here. Okay, so again, in my early years of training, that this uneven pigment would mean that this person was full of toxins. We needed to cleanse. We wanted to turn these eyes blue. Nothing could be further from the truth. The teachers who taught me this before had pictures, had books that had pictures of before and after, and you know, lesions did look smaller and eyes did look bluer, but we also didn't know anything about, well, we didn't know much. I didn't know much about photographic technology and how easy it is to manipulate photos, right? Even back then, shooting print film, easy to manipulate photos. So when I wasn't getting those kinds of changes in my client's eyes, I really got frustrated. I was ready to walk away from this and just to say, this is garbage. I'll just, you know, I'll work with other modalities, but I won't do this anymore. And so, but that is when I got to start learning constitutional iridology, the saying, you know, when the student is ready, the teacher appears, right? So in this eye, again, we are thinking the liver and the kidneys dominate. We've got sympathetic nervous system dominating here as well. We've got that brown pigment sitting in the nutritive zone in the stomach. So we know stomach is being influenced by liver, right? So we need to ask, what is your diet like? What is your lifestyle like? Where do you want, what do you need help with? What other symptoms do you have of liver? You know, how's your iron? Are your blood counts good? How's your immune system? We can identify markings, but it's not a case of one mark equals one problem. Instead, we're combining markings to build the understanding, right? We want to have that deeper understanding, that family history, all that good stuff. This is a client. She is one who has been with me for over 4 decades. She was one of my first clients. And I've just so loved working with her over the years. She started coming back, you know, she was on an away phase, and then she started coming back about 3 years ago. And her problem now was that she wanted to lose weight. Her blood pressure was up. She was in her mid-60s, and her cholesterol was up, her triglycerides were up, and so was her hemoglobin A1C. Now, her eyes don't show toxicity. They show inherent potentials. We've got this bit of a milky film, which is going to correlate to the lipemic, to the lipids, to the hemoglobin A1C, to the cholesterol levels. So the liver functions, right? And we can't reverse that. No matter how good we get her numbers, this is not going away. The cornea is not going to give this up, right? Because we've worked together, I've worked with her for many years. She's well read. She actually was a practitioner at one time, right? We needed to work on her goals. We needed to start working on balancing her. It wasn't going to be a weight loss program. It was going to be a health balancing program. So we totally revamped her diet because it had really slipped a long way. And we judiciously chose some herbs, and literally within 3 months, she'd taken off about 20 pounds. Her hemoglobin A1C, her cholesterol, her blood pressure, her triglycerides, everything was in the normal range. It was just that fast. And we did a fistful of supplements with her as well. About a year later, there was a significant family stress. She slipped off her program for several months, and then she had a heart attack. Now, I believe my father had several heart attacks. I firmly believe that a heart attack is not just from elevated cholesterol. I believe there's always an emotional underpinning to a heart attack, an emotional cause for a heart attack. And so now this client is on 9 different medications, and the doctors have scared the daylights out of her that if she comes off any of these, she will die. And so we are really working hard with her to get her to work with her foods and to be more active, to go for walks and things like that. We're working really hard with her to learn some stress management techniques. And we're introducing herbs around the edge that are not contraindicated with her medications. Our goal is to get her numbers coming into balance to the point where the doctors will say, we can begin reducing these meds, right? And that's where we're at with her. We've got a lot of work to do, with her. Again, in my original training, every one of these markings in here would have been a pathological problem that was happening right now. I had some friends who actually, their family owned a funeral home. I began to think I should just keep their business cards in my desk. I mean, if this person had all of these problems, could they actually live for another 3 weeks? I don't know, right? And that was a part of the frustration that turned me over to constitutional. We know that pigments are not the result of toxic exposure, whether it's the soft yellow or these brown clouds. These are epigenetic. Babies are not born with pigments as a general rule. Typically, by the time they're 6, we will see pigments, often by the time they're 3. And again, that's the eyes continuing to mature just the way the immune system and the digestive tract and the nervous system all mature with time. And so these are all of these systems mature with time under genetic direction. These pigments come into the eyes under genetic direction. And they tell us that an organ genetically wants to be out of balance at this point in time when we start seeing the pigment. And so we need to look for what symptoms are we seeing. This is why I like to take photos of my clients' eyes annually. It would be unusual to see a pigment this large come up over 1 year, but you might begin to see a little bit of diffuse brown clouding, and over the years it would build. And I've got those time-lapse photos, if you will, of some of my children, where we did photos of their eyes, and then 20 years later, when I got a new camera, we did photos. Not valid for before and after because different camera equipment, but it's very clear that the pigments did not exist in the original photo, and they do exist in the newer photo, right? So constitutional iridology teaches us to look for patterns and to understand the interrelationship of organs, and that if the person is already doing things that were supporting good health, there may be no symptoms, but that doesn't erase the inherent predisposition. Old iridology says with this eye that this person is headed for a nervous breakdown, and this person is blocking arteries and probably needs a liver cleanse, and and this person has parasites. Okay, so Nicole, is this sounding familiar? Because I'm going to burn all of that up for you. We're going to throw it away. All right, so this is an Asian woman in her mid-30s. She and her husband came to me because they wanted to have a baby. They've been trying for 3 years. And they'd been to the fertility clinic. The fertility clinic had given her Clomid and metformin, and that was all. No dietary guidance, no nothing, just take these drugs. And so as I'm looking at these eyes, number one, this does not mean parasites. This does not mean blocking arteries. This does not mean a nervous breakdown. Okay, we're going to throw that out right now. This is one case where a mapping was helpful. Okay, hematogenic liver, right? Liver and blood are undercurrents. This suggests not managing her carbs well, which can go into triglycerides, cholesterol, or insulin resistance, or all 3. Petite woman, definitely not overweight. I had to ask her, had anyone ever suggested that she might have polycystic ovarian syndrome? Her menstrual cycles were 90 days apart. And she said, oh yeah, that's what they said. And so I'm looking at this then, and I'm saying, has anyone ever suggested that you might be insulin resistant? Oh yeah, they gave me metformin for that. They say I'm type 2 diabetic. Okay, all right. So we're establishing some groundwork here. This does not always mean type 2 diabetes. This was adding markings and symptoms together. Does that make sense? Does that make sense? That this will not mean type 2 diabetes for everybody, right? And so this is one set of eyes where I did map. All right, so here we are looking at I should be able to tell this, some eyes, the pupil is so centered. So when I can't tell easily, we pull out our handy dandy ruler and we measure. Okay, so this is a right iris. And when we look at the right iris, she has one of these coming right down through the ovary region. Now, what does that mean? Not that she's got parasites. It means there's a nerve feed interruption to the ovary. And she had a partner one in her other eye. So both ovaries had this nerve feed issue. She also has markings coming down through her vagina and uterus. So we know that there's some possible challenges there, right? So we talked about her diet. First generation immigrant from, I believe it was Hong Kong, brought with her, she and her husband brought with them the white rice and the sticky sauces, and put with that all of the worst that North America has to offer. Her diet was the perfect setup for type 2 diabetes. So we did some really hard diet work, so hard that when we were talking about the diet work, her face got really long. And I could see that she was about ready to say, we're never going to have a baby. Her husband reached over and took her hand, bless him. And he said, sweetheart, don't worry. I'll take over all the food preparation. You just eat what I cook. He did a marvelous job. He went on the same eating program she was on so that they could do it together. He had lost some weight. He had about 20 pounds he wanted to take off. It took 20 pounds off him. With her, it took those 90-day cycles, brought them down to 35 days. A 90-day cycle will never be fertile. We got her down to 35. We watched her basal body temperature. We lengthened out her luteal phase. It took her 18 months of working with diet, supplements that we tweaked once a month, sometimes twice a month. We worked so hard, so hard. When she got pregnant, we'd been working together for 18 months, and I'd been awake all night before their appointment thinking, how am I going to tell them I have nothing more to offer? I've done everything. I've even done extra research. I've got nothing more. So they came in for their appointment and they said, we've got some news. And I'm very sure they're saying, yeah, we're not going to come in anymore. Instead, they said, we had a positive pregnancy test this morning. We did a little happy dance. And then, of course, the concern is that she was PCOS, type 2 diabetes. Now her risk of going gestational diabetic, or having an ectopic pregnancy, or having a premature delivery, are sky high, right? So we babysat, like we continued every month, often 2 or 3 times a month, tweaking and adjusting. She never developed type 2 diabetes. She had a beautiful 7-pound baby, and her delivery was 4 hours from start to finish. The doctors could not believe that she did not develop gestational diabetes. So we were so excited for her. Another client of mine, a returning client, he'd been with me about 10 or 15 years ago, felt great, faded off, came back about 2 years ago when his doctor said, yeah, you've got insulin resistance, you are type 2 diabetic, you've got elevated cholesterol, triglycerides, and blood pressure, and type 2 diabetes. And he didn't want to have any of that. So 5 feet 11 inches tall, 175 pounds, 64 years when we started working again the second time. Hemoglobin A1C was 7.2. We needed under 5.9. His kidney filtration, glomerular filtration rate was 61. At 60, you are now into stage 1 of chronic kidney disease. His potassium was slightly low. He was already on medications from his doctor. He was on metformin, which gave him diarrhea, so they switched him over to Glumetza and Giardians. He was on hydrochlorothiazide, which is a diuretic for his blood pressure. He was on Trandolapril for his cholesterol, a Mylan torvastatin for cholesterol, and sildenafil, which is Viagra, because the blood pressure medications made it so that he couldn't have an erection. So I also noted a lot of throat clearing, which suggests to me he probably had acid reflux. His diet was breakfast was a cinnamon bun or a muffin or Cheerios. Nothing good in there for his situation. Lunch was a sandwich with white bread, lunch meat, tuna, or egg salad. Supper, his wife is um, an air hostess, like she's we used to call them stewardesses. I know the flight attendants, that's what they call them now. And so she's gone on 4-day pairings. So when she's away, he does fast food, pizza, things like that while she's gone, right? So his diet is garbage. So what we see, we've got a bit of that suggestion that his liver doesn't want to manage his carbs. Well, no duh, he also has the elevated cholesterol and triglycerides. He's got this ring that tells us in 2 or 3 different ways that his stomach doesn't want to digest proteins well. We see that his intestinal tract doesn't want to move things through in a timely fashion. And he internalizes his stress. So we changed up his diet. We got him to do the protein and veggies mantra. So we completely changed his diet to protein and veggies. You get protein and stir-fried sauteed vegetables for breakfast. You get protein and a great big huge salad with maybe, if you want to have some cold cooked vegetables for lunch, that would be fine. Supper is protein and more veggies. And, we need some good oils in here as well. We also talked about portion control because he really likes to eat. So we had to do that. Gave him a good program of supplements that were specific to him. Got him to start walking twice a day for 30 minutes each time. And we've tweaked his program about every 3 or 4 months. We just look at recent labs and how do we need to change this? What's your weight doing? He had a few pounds he needed to take off. And over the course of the 2 years since we started working, the doctor has already taken away the Giardians and the Glumetza. His triglycerides are coming down. They've reduced the amount of blood pressure meds he's taking, and they've reduced his cholesterol meds as well. We suspect, and his doctor has said, if these numbers keep improving, his hemoglobin A1C is down to 5.9. That's the upper acceptable level of normal. But if we can keep these numbers coming down, he'll be off all of his meds within the next 6 months. And that's what we want to have happen here. All right, so a little bit of information. How's that? Do you see how quick and easy iridology is when you know it? Yeah. Little information about dynamic iridology. If you've got any questions, pop them into that chat box as we're coming close to the end. Dynamic Iridology Assessment System is the only live online fully mentored course for herbalists, naturopaths, and anyone who's got that college level anatomy and physiology course under their belt who want to streamline their clinical work without sacrificing client care. Actually, it is a way to enhance client care because it means that you will make laser-focused programs rather than these long lists of things they can do. You're going to, and that's going to lead to better client compliance, which means long-term retention, which means your clients will do what mine do, 4 or 5 appointments, disappear for a while. After a few years, they'll come back for more, right? So good, so good. The next course start date is November 28th, and registration is open. The only way you get to register is if you have a one-on-one conversation with me. I need to have a chat with you. We need to make sure you do know that you've got your anatomy and physiology, that you've got proof of that. And in that conversation, we will talk about tuition. I've just put this link into your chat box for you. Dynamic Iridology is 20 lessons long, so 20 weeks long. Live webinar classes recorded for playback on demand. I limit the number of students per cohort because I want you to have a good experience. I want you to learn what you need to learn. We do live group mentoring twice each month. So if you've got extra questions, if you're working on a case that you need support with, you bring those things in. If you've got business questions, you bring that in. And the mentoring continues after your class is done. We have a student and alumni. Right now it's me, it's going to be moving, but we've got a private social media group for my students to come to get more support if they feel they need it. Your textbook is digital and downloadable. It's included in your tuition. So Nicole, to answer your question, yes, my book is the one I would recommend, right? But you can only get it if you're a student. The cheat sheets, 45 pages of notes distilled down into charts and tables to make them easy to find. And for students who want to be certified through IPA, you have an option of including certification mentoring in your package as well. Sophia Perez-Viller says the commitment that Judith has for teaching is extraordinary, and the amount of support you get from Iridology, from the Iridology course, is fabulous. The material is very clear and thorough. The pace of the course is dynamic, but with enough time to integrate all the parts. As this was my second Iridology course, I was not sure if it would just be an add-on, but it has exceeded my expectations. I've learned lots from the course material and classes, expanded previous knowledge, and gained more confidence. I can see now how this course has helped me to get better answers from my clients and to design effective protocols in very little time. Highly recommended for beginners and advanced. Kimberly Zadalis, who's got more degrees behind her than I could ever imagine. And when you look at her website, my goodness, she's got credentials. She's also has a master's degree in imaging. So she works in an imaging clinic where she does the imaging tests. If you're wondering which Iridology course to take, you can stop looking. You found it. Judith Cobb is an excellent instructor with many years of experience. She is a caring and compassionate person who is dedicated to the field of Iridology and her students. I personally practice both Eastern and Western physiology medicine and was very impressed with the layout of her program. She makes it easy for her students to balance work, life, and study. Sharon Bimrose, one last testimonial. A naturopath from Australia, I'd already taken Iridology as part of my studies as a naturopath. However, Judith's course, Confident Nutritionist, Dynamic Iridology, yes, I've changed the name to just Dynamic Iridology, surpassed my previous training, instructor, content delivery, documentation, and support. Judith taught in a manner that I could understand visually and auditory. Dynamic Iridology was well delivered, inspiring and motivating, giving me the much needed structure to knowledge I already had learned over the years. Dynamic Iridology also provided me with the most up-to-date Iridology information, along with the added bonus of Judith's extensive experience of holistic health. In absolute appreciation, Judith, I thank you for making me a better iridologist. Love that. So again, if you are interested in looking at the November 28th start date and learning more about tuition and the different packages that are available. And Marie, the packages have changed a bit since we spoke. So, if you want to book another conversation with me, that is perfectly, you're invited to do that. You're welcome to do that. So use that link I posted in the webinar chat and let's have a conversation. Let's see if this is what you're looking for right now and if it's a good fit. Thank you so much for being with me today. That went longer than I usually go. I hope it was of value to you. I hope you feel like it was time well spent, that you learned more about Iridology and that you're maybe excited and want to look at joining me for the course. Have a brilliant evening. I look forward to speaking with you soon. Take good care. Bye for now.